You know, sometimes a movie comes along that's more than just a movie. It becomes a cultural event. And today, we're diving deep into Dhuranthar, a film that didn't just smash box office records, it became a global phenomenon and a political lightning rod all at the same time. So that's the big question, right? How in the world did a spy film, a really long one at that, manage to rake in so much money while also kicking off this massive international firestorm? That's what we're going to unpack today. To even begin to wrap our heads around the Dhuranthar phenomenon, you've got to start with the numbers. And seriously, these numbers are just staggering. Okay, let's just take a second to process that number. 1,347 crore rupees. That's not just a record breaker. That's the kind of number that completely rewrites the definition of a blockbuster. It's truly mind-boggling. And get this, it did all that while being nearly 3.5 hours long. Think about that. In an age of short attention spans, millions and millions of people chose to sit in a theater for that long. That alone tells you this film had something special. And what's really fascinating to me is where that money came from. Sure, it was a gigantic hit in India, no surprise there. But look at that overseas number. It proves this wasn't just a local story. It had this incredibly powerful global appeal. But here's where it gets wild. The movie was flat out banned in several countries, including the entire Gulf region, which is a huge market. And yet, it still found its audience. It actually became one of the most pirated films ever in Pakistan. It was a story that people were determined to see, one way or another. Okay, so we've seen the insane numbers, the bans, the controversy, but what is this movie actually about? Let's get into the plot, because its roots are planted firmly in the real world. At its core, Dhuranthar is a spy action thriller. The plot is pretty straightforward on the surface. An undercover agent goes deep behind enemy lines to take down a terror network. It's a classic setup, but the execution is anything but. And this is what made it hit so hard for so many people. The filmmakers didn't just pull this story out of thin air. They anchored it in real, deeply traumatic national events. This wasn't just fiction. For many, it felt like history. And just look at the characters. These aren't just names, they're titles, they're archetypes. You've got Wrath of God versus the apex predator. It tells you right away that this story is painting with a very broad, very epic brush, turning people into larger-than-life symbols. Now, you don't make over 1 billion rupees on story alone. Dhuranthar was an absolute visual feast, a total action spectacle. And how they put together those incredible action scenes is a story in itself. I think this was a genius move. Instead of just one action director, they hired 4 different international experts. So you had the gritty, practical stunts from India, the slick Korean martial arts, the high-flying European parkour. It was this amazing blend of styles that made the action feel fresh and totally unpredictable. All right, but let's get to it. For all its success, for all its technical brilliance, the thing Dhuranthar will always be remembered for is the intense debate it sparked. This is where things get really complicated. And this right here is the central problem, isn't it? The movie opens with a disclaimer saying this is a work of fiction, but then it immediately uses real news footage, real audio clips, and characters based on real people. It constantly walks this line. And that's exactly where all the controversy began. On one side of the argument, you had prominent journalists who praised the film. They saw it as historically on point, arguing that it was bravely tackling complex issues that are often ignored. But on the other side, you had academic experts, people who've dedicated their lives to studying the region, saying, no way. They called the film's portrayal a total fantasy, a harmful misrepresentation of a very real, very complex place. So that became the question on everyone's mind. Is this a patriotic film telling a hard truth? Or is it a very cleverly disguised piece of political propaganda? And the people who argued it was propaganda had some pretty specific evidence. You have a main character who's a clear stand-in for a major real-life political figure. You have dialogue directly attacking previous governments. And it literally ends with a slogan that's been used in actual political campaigns. It's pretty on the nose. So, after all the dust has settled, what are we left with? What's the real legacy of a film that was so beloved by so many and so heavily criticized by so many others? Well, this Rotten Tomatoes score kind of says it all, doesn't it? The audience score was through the roof, but professional critics were completely split right down the middle. It perfectly captures that massive divide between how the public saw it and how critics did. And this wasn't just an academic debate. The controversy had actual, real-world consequences. The filmmakers were hit with legal notices and were forced to go back and actually censor parts of their own movie after it was already in theaters. And if you can believe it, this story is far from over. A sequel is already on the way, which means this whole explosive debate is probably going to be reignited all over again. So it leaves us with this huge, lingering question, one that's a lot bigger than just one movie. When our entertainment intentionally blurs the line between what's real and what's not, whose job is it to tell us the truth? And maybe more importantly, what happens to all of us when they don't?